The moment Tony Stark stepped onto Titan and looked Thanos directly in the eyes, the entire battle changed its meaning. It was never just another superhero fight filled with explosions and flashy powers. There was something deeply personal hidden underneath every punch, every line, and every second of silence between them. Tony arrived wearing the most advanced armor he had ever created, a suit built from pure desperation, fear, and sleepless nights after the Battle of New York. You could actually feel that fear inside the nanotech itself, because every weapon forming around his body looked less like technology and more like a man trying to outrun a nightmare. The strangest thing was the way Thanos looked at Tony. It was almost respectful, almost familiar. Even before the fight reached its climax, there was this uncomfortable feeling that these two men somehow understood each other more than anybody else in the universe possibly could. When Thanos finally said, "You're not the only one cursed with knowledge," the scene suddenly became much darker than people realized at first. That line was not random dialogue written to sound cool. It completely changed the relationship between both characters. Thanos did not see Tony as another Avenger standing in his path. He saw him as someone carrying the exact same burden. Both men were visionaries trapped inside worlds that refused to listen to them. Tony saw the invasion coming years before anyone else accepted the danger. After New York, his entire personality changed. The arrogant billionaire image slowly disappeared, replaced by a paranoid genius obsessed with preparation. He could not sleep. He built suit after suit after suit because he believed another invasion was inevitable. Everybody around him thought he was losing control, but from Tony's perspective, he was the only sane person in a blind world. Thanos lived through the same isolation. He believed the universe was heading toward collapse because of overpopulation and dying resources. His methods were horrifying, but in his mind, he was saving existence itself. That is why Titan feels less like a hero versus villain fight and more like two broken prophets crashing into each other. One wanted to save the universe through protection, while the other wanted to save it through destruction. Their philosophies were opposites, but their emotional wounds were almost identical. And once you start looking at Infinity War from that angle, Thanos' behavior becomes incredibly fascinating. Notice how he barely talks to most Avengers. Hulk is just muscle to him. Thor is simply another warrior. Even Doctor Strange is treated more like an obstacle guarding a stone. But Tony is different. Thanos studies him. He listens to him. He answers him carefully. It feels like he already knew exactly who Tony Stark was long before they ever met on Titan. That detail matters more now than ever because Avengers Doomsday appears to be taking this hidden connection and twisting it into something far more terrifying. Instead of respecting Tony the way Thanos did, Dr. Doom may weaponize everything Tony represented. And honestly, that possibility feels emotionally scarier than another Infinity War level invasion. The answer to how Thanos knew Tony likely begins back in 2012 during the Battle of New York. Most people focus on the portal scene because it looked visually incredible, but from Thanos' perspective, that moment was catastrophic. Loki was supposed to weaken Earth easily with the Chitauri army. Humanity was not expected to resist cosmic forces. Yet one ordinary human being without magic, without super soldier serum, and without alien powers hijacked a nuclear missile, flew directly into space and destroyed the invading fleet alone. Imagine how impossible that must have looked to Thanos. He had conquered worlds for years, but suddenly a man from a primitive planet disrupted his entire invasion using intelligence and sacrifice. That changes everything. Thanos probably began studying Earth immediately after that failure, and every path led back to Tony Stark. Not Thor, not Captain America, Tony. Because Tony represented unpredictable evolution. He was proof that humanity could advance faster than expected under pressure. In many ways, Tony's mind became more dangerous to Thanos than any Infinity Stone because genius cannot be predicted or controlled once it starts adapting. And if you pay attention to the Titan fight itself, Marvel quietly confirms this fear. Tony becomes the first person in the movie capable of making Thanos bleed. Think about how important that is. Hulk failed. Thor had not arrived yet. Entire civilizations feared Thanos for generations. Yet Tony Stark, a dying human exhausted from endless battles, forced the Mad Titan to acknowledge him physically. But what matters more is the amount of power Thanos needed to stop him. He used multiple Infinity Stones against Tony because ordinary strength was not enough. Even then, Tony kept improvising. That is exactly why Doctor Strange protected him afterward. Strange saw millions of futures, and somehow Tony surviving became the single fixed point connected to victory. The universe did not merely need Iron Man, it needed Tony Stark specifically, because nobody else could outthink destiny itself when the final moment finally arrived. Endgame proved that idea perfectly. Tony did the one thing Thanos never expected anybody to accomplish. He built another gauntlet. Entire cosmic civilizations feared that power. Yet Tony reverse engineered the concept in secret while also solving time travel almost overnight. That is insane. Even Bruce Banner struggled to fully understand what Tony achieved. And this is where Dr. Doom enters the larger picture in an incredibly dangerous way. Doom is not just another powerful villain with magical abilities and an ego problem. He is one of the few minds in Marvel capable of truly standing beside Tony intellectually. A lot of people focus only on Doom's armor or sorcery, but his greatest weapon has always been his understanding of human weakness. If Doom studies the Infinity Saga carefully, he will arrive at the same terrifying conclusion Thanos reached. Every catastrophic failure eventually connects back to Tony Stark interfering, adapting, sacrificing, or inventing solutions nobody else imagined possible. The difference is that Doom will learn from Thanos' mistakes instead of repeating them. Even on Titan, there was a strange reluctance in the way Thanos approached him. Doom would never make that emotional error. He would analyze Tony clinically, almost like dissecting a blueprint. He would study every invention, every emotional attachment, every sacrifice, and every trauma connected to Iron Man's legacy. Then, he would ask a horrifying question. What happens when the Avengers are forced to fight the symbol that once inspired them? Because defeating heroes physically is difficult, but psychologically destroying them is something entirely different. Doom understands that memories can become weapons stronger than armies, and nobody carries more emotional weight in the MCU than Tony Stark. He died saving half the universe. His sacrifice became sacred to the people closest to him. Captain America moved on. Natasha died. But Tony left behind a living emotional wound that never fully healed. Doom could exploit that wound with terrifying precision and patience until the Avengers completely collapsed from inside. Imagine Peter Parker standing face to face with someone wearing Tony Stark's face, speaking with his voice, using his technology, but acting without mercy. That alone could emotionally shatter Peter before the fight even begins. Peter never truly recovered from losing Tony. Far From Home showed that clearly. Every decision Peter made was shaped by the pressure of trying to live up to Tony's memory. Now imagine Doom turning that memory into a nightmare. Peter would hesitate constantly because part of him would desperately want to believe Tony was still alive somehow. Then there is Pepper Potts. Her entire journey with Tony was built around trying to pull him away from danger long enough for him to have peace. She watched him sacrifice his health, his sleep, and eventually his life for everyone else. Seeing another man use Tony's image as a weapon would feel deeply cruel, and Morgan Stark might suffer the most. A child seeing the face of her heroic father transformed into the symbol of fear is the kind of emotional storytelling Marvel rarely explores fully, but Doom would absolutely weaponize it. That is what makes Doctor Doom fundamentally different from Thanos. Thanos wanted balance. Thanos destroyed worlds because he believed suffering was necessary for survival. Doom destroys hope because hopeless people become easier to dominate. And if Marvel truly adapts that idea correctly, Avengers Doomsday could become the most psychologically intense Avengers film ever made. The battle would no longer revolve around stopping another giant army invading Earth. The real conflict would happen inside the minds of the heroes themselves. Every confrontation would force them to question memory, loyalty, grief, and identity. Because how do you attack someone carrying the face of the man who once saved your life? How do you separate the symbol from the monster wearing it? That hesitation alone could give Doom the advantage he needs. The new generation remains emotionally fractured. Sam Wilson is still proving himself. Strange is distracted by multiversal threats. Doom would arrive at the perfect possible moment when Earth's protectors are emotionally vulnerable and disconnected from one another. There is also another detail people are quietly overlooking. Tony Stark's technology already exists everywhere inside the MCU. His satellites, drones, artificial intelligence systems, clean energy designs, and defense networks became woven into the modern world itself. That means Doom would not need to build an empire from scratch. He could corrupt Tony's existing legacy and turn humanity's trust against itself. Imagine Stark Industries' technology becoming the foundation of a global dictatorship without the public realizing it initially. That would perfectly mirror Tony's greatest fear from Age of Ultron. He always worried his inventions might eventually cause catastrophic damage if they fell into the wrong hands. But Doom could evolve it to a completely different scale. Instead of creating a rogue AI, he could transform Tony Stark himself into the ultimate propaganda machine. The world would not see Doctor Doom arriving as a foreign conqueror. They might see a familiar savior returning with promises of protection and order. That possibility honestly feels disturbingly realistic when you think about modern society and how easily symbols influence public trust. And maybe that is the cruelest part of this entire theory. Tony spent his whole life trying to protect people from threats arriving in the future, but his own image may become the greatest future threat of all. There is tragic poetry in that idea. The man who sacrificed himself to save the universe could accidentally become the emotional doorway, allowing Doom to conquer it afterward. Suddenly, Thanos' respect for Tony gains another layer too. Thanos understood how dangerous powerful intelligence becomes when mixed with fear, guilt, and determination. He saw himself reflected inside Tony because both men believed they alone could prevent catastrophe. Doom may push that similarity even further by proving that heroic legacies can become prisons for the people left behind. And if the Avengers cannot emotionally separate Tony Stark from the monster manipulating his identity, they may lose before the real war even starts. That would explain why Doomsday sounds less like the title of a battle and more like the title of an unavoidable psychological collapse. Not just the end of cities or universes, but the destruction of emotional certainty itself. Doom's true power may be convincing them that belief itself is broken forever. When you connect all these pieces together, The Infinity Saga suddenly feels like one massive setup for this exact kind of story. Tony was never important only because he built Iron Man suits. He mattered because he represented human potential evolving faster than fear. Thanos recognized that. Doctor Strange protected that. Even Nick Fury relied on it from the beginning. Tony constantly transformed impossible situations into solvable problems through intelligence and sacrifice. But now, the MCU faces a terrifying question. What happens after the greatest problem solver disappears? Nature hates a vacuum, and villains exploit one. Doom, stepping into the shadow left behind by Tony Stark, feels narratively perfect because he represents intelligence without conscience. In a strange way, Doom may act like the dark reflection of Tony Stark more than any villain before him. Smarter than Ultron, more personal than Thanos, more emotionally devastating than Loki ever was. And if Marvel truly commits to that direction, audiences may finally experience an Avengers story where winning physically means almost nothing compared to surviving emotionally. Because scars caused by punches eventually heal, but scars caused by memory can destroy people for the rest of their lives. The most chilling possibility is that Doom may genuinely believe he is honoring Tony rather than insulting him. That sounds insane at first, but think carefully about how twisted genius works in Marvel stories. Doom could view Tony Stark as the final proof that ordinary governments, heroes, and systems always fail without superior minds controlling them from above. From Doom's perspective, Tony solved time travel, saved trillions of lives, created world-changing technology, and repeatedly sacrificed himself because weaker people around him could not handle the burden. Doom might believe he is continuing Tony's mission correctly by removing freedom entirely and replacing chaos with absolute order. That philosophical angle would make their connection even darker because suddenly Doom would not merely be wearing Tony's image to traumatize the Avengers. He would be trying to redefine what Iron Man represented forever. That is terrifying because symbols outlive people. Children grow up hearing stories about heroes, and whoever controls those stories controls the future. Doom understands mythology better than almost any Marvel villain. If he corrupts Tony Stark's legacy successfully, he does not just defeat the Avengers physically. He rewrites the emotional foundation of an entire generation. And honestly, that kind of victory feels far more permanent than another snap ever did. So when I go back and watch that Titan scene now, it feels completely different than it did years ago. I no longer see just a battle between Iron Man and Thanos. I see the beginning of a terrifying idea slowly growing across the MCU. Thanos recognized Tony Stark as the greatest threat in the universe because knowledge creates unpredictable people, and unpredictable people change destiny. But Dr. Doom may take that lesson further than Thanos ever imagined. Instead of trying to kill Tony Stark, he may resurrect everything people loved about him and poison it from the inside until hope itself becomes unrecognizable. And maybe that is the real reason Marvel kept returning to Tony's legacy after Endgame. If that theory becomes reality, Avengers Doomsday will not simply test the strength of the Avengers. It will test whether they can let go of the past long enough to stop it from destroying the future. Like, share, subscribe, and send your theories in the comments. Liam Harrison from MovieCast, thanks you for staying with me until the end.